All right, and welcome to the Replace Your Income podcast with Kevin and
Steve.
Hi.
I don't know if I've ever said Steve quite so forcefully before.
That was you were showing off your baritone.
Yeah.
What's up, man? How are you?
Doing well. Hey, welcome back. How's your trip?
Thank you. I was in Phoenix. Phoenix was wonderful. It was warm. It was hot. It was like 105 degrees.
Wow.
But I was 2 hours outside of Phoenix, like up at a camp, and I was doing some youth speaking there, and it was really, really cool. But I got to tell you, so it was interesting because there's all of these leaders that live in Phoenix that were there with the youth. It was kind of like a youth church group. And all of them kept asking me what I do, right? And I mean, they knew that I was a speaker, obviously, but that's why they brought me in. They kept asking me what I do. And it was so fascinating because what did I say? I said, I do real estate. I'm in real estate investment, whatever. It was such a reminder, Steve, that there is not a single human on the planet that has any sort of job or income or is thinking about the future that does not want to be in real estate, that does not. And so many of them have no idea how to do it. I had this great conversation with this guy. He was a dentist, right? And he was like the main leader of this group. He was the stake president. And so we were talking, and he was like, so what do you do? And I told him about real estate, and he's like, oh yeah, real estate, man. You know, I own a home in Park City. And I was like, oh, cool. And he was talking about that. And he just started to ask me questions about what we do at DFY. And I started to share it with him, and his eyes got so big. And it was so awesome because here's a guy who's a very successful dentist, right? He makes great money. He has never considered the ability to create tax-free retirement income from real estate. Never once. This guy was probably 60-something years old, and he's been successful. He's thinking about transitioning out of being a dentist. He's never even known that was an option to him, right? That was one of these amazing conversations I had. There were other guys that were there that are developers in Phoenix. And so they were asking me like, oh, so you're in real estate? We're in real estate too. And they're doing these like big developments. And I'm like, I'm not in your kind of real estate. I'm in rinky-dink real estate. They're like, oh, what does that mean? I was like, well, we do single family properties, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, yeah, we've done, over 5,000 properties, over $1 billion. They're like, that is not rinky-dinky real estate. And I was like, no, but what's cool is we are taking real estate to the everyman or to the every person. And that was so much of the conversation. And it was just interesting because as the conversation evolved over the day that I was there with people, I just kept on having all these leaders come up and want to know more about what we do because every one of them wants to do real estate, knows that they don't want to do it in Phoenix because it's just too expensive. They're wondering if we're doing real estate in Utah, and every single time I said no. And then I would tell them the markets that we're in, and they're like, really? Why are you there? And I would tell them why we are there. And that's part of the conversation that we want to have today is like, we know that real estate is powerful, it's profitable, it creates all of these really cool things like a potential tax-free retirement, which is something we've begun to understand more and more, that maybe it's not so much about temporary daily cash flow, but it's about, I was going to say this too. So I've been re-listening to Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I haven't listened to it probably in like 20 years. I don't know. It's been forever. And he tells a story in there, and he's talking about this property that he got that was producing $40 a month of cash flow. And he mentions in there that he didn't care because of what it was doing for his long-term wealth growth. It was in his asset column, not his liability column. And it was just so cool. It was like just this reiteration, right? And so all of these people that I'm talking to all want assets. They all want real estate. They want to know where to go and do real estate because every one of them has income, they have opportunity, but they want to make sure that whatever they're doing is safe, but it's also profitable. And that's one of the things we wanted to talk about today because, Steve, the world is kind of like literally on fire and underwater right now. I mean, and unfortunately, that's not a joke. I mean, it's rough out there, man.
It is. It's super rough. Right now, it's interesting. Every night before I go to bed, I look at the headlines, I look at the news, and I read a few articles. And a lot of it's about all the wars going on and like the different things going on there. And if it's not that, it's about hurricanes here in the United States or other natural disasters. So literally on fire or underwater is one of those things that, is pretty disconcerting for most people. And people, I think, sometimes people get a little bit overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And they think it's like, man, it's like, should I just keep everything in cash and stay super liquid? Or like, should I have it all like over here, over there? Like, what do I do with my money? And what if I even have any? Because inflation has taken so much of it. There's not a whole lot left over at the end of the month, right? But the little bit that we can put away, like, what do we do with it?
Yeah.
And because if we put it over here and it can disappear like that, there's so many like forces pulling us. Like cryptocurrency is like a big one. Like I don't know. Real estate obviously is another one. The stock market. There's just lots of different options. So it's like, what do you do? What's safe? Like what's not? What's going to get me to where I want to go quickly enough, but safely enough? And that's one of the words that you use that kind of really resonates with me.
Yeah.
Is like safely.
Yeah.
Like, how do we get there safely, but in time that we can actually, use some of the funds? I just spent last weekend working on or updating my, my estate and trust and my will and that kind of a thing. And I'm just like, geez Louise.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm talking about death and dying and
right.
being gone. And like, what am I going to leave and stuff?
Yeah.
I'm just like, gee. And so like, at different stages of life, like we want to know that we're going to like that where we're trying to go financially.
Yeah.
Is doable and that we can get there. And so like when you wrap all these things together, I had a moment or two along the way where I was just kind of like a little bit overwhelmed, where it's like, gosh, like, is it even worth it? Like, what am I even doing? Like, maybe I should just go become like a professional Harley, like, bum, whatever, it's just like.
You would be a good one. I think you'd have to grow out your beard like longer than mine. You'd need to go full. I would like to see that.
It would be pretty cool, actually.
Because if you would only wear leather and have a long beard, I really want to see that, Steve Earle.
Hey,
I think that could be really fantastic.
Sometimes it sounds like really reasonable.
I'm pulling something up on my phone because as you're talking, I told you that I've been like re-listening to Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I was just looking up the last chapter that I finished because I knew the principle of it, but I didn't know how he worded it. And because here's what and let me tell you why I was going through this. So you're talking about like all of this stuff, right? Like, what am I going to do? How is it going to all work out? And he says something to Rich Dad Poor Dad. I don't think I understood when I went through it probably the first time what he meant by this, but I've started to understand it significantly more as I get older and as we play in this world. And here's what the fifth principle in the book is, that the rich invent money. And what he means by that is really you have to understand. So we place so much significance on money, and money is fake. Like it's crazy to think about that, okay? But what he is saying is that money is it's not, we love to place all this tangible gravity on what money is. But money can be magicked, right? If you play by money's rules. If you don't play by the rules of money, or you don't play by the rules of the tax code and how to weave in and out of it, then
if you don't know them.
Or if you don't know them, then yes, money feels like this thing that is so difficult to strive for and to keep, and we worry about what that money is, and that fear-based approach can really impact us. And that's why we have conversations like, where should we put our money? Where do we keep it safe? What does that look like? Because we've assigned such tremendous value. Now, here's just something, because I've been reflecting on this quite a bit. Like, I get that money is going to be a significant piece of my life. It's a significant piece of what we do as a company. And this idea of money, I'm not going to call it something tangible. The idea of money, the reason real estate is powerful is because real estate takes advantage of more rules than just about anything else in the money game, right? If there's rules to the game of money, to acquiring additional dollars, to magicking additional dollars, to inventing additional dollars, to spending and having lifestyle, if that's what money is doing, real estate does this thing where it uses the forces of what money is more effectively than almost anything else. Now, we always talk about it in terms of real estate has multiple profit centers. That's another way that we word it, right? But if you think about like, what do we want money to do? At the end of the day, okay, end of the day, what do we want money to do? We want money so that we can exchange whatever this currency is. And really, I think when we say money, it's different than when we think of it as a currency or a medium of exchange, right? We want to increase the level of currency so that we can exchange for potentially more things, right? Like that's what we're looking to do. And if that's all we're doing, if we're looking at that, we have to say, how do I get more of it? And how do I keep as much of it as possible so that I can continue to play the game? Real estate, not all real estate, to be clear, but this kind of real estate, Moneyball real estate, purchase-worthy property hitting real estate, singles real estate in the right markets. And we're going to talk a little bit about like what that means because everybody has been asking like, look, there's all these hurricanes going on in Florida. Like what is happening with the properties in Florida? This kind of real estate leverages more of the rules of money than, I don't know, just about anything else. So the question is, where do I put money or where do I go create more of it? Is it the stock market? Is it crypto? Is it these things? I think maybe one of the things we ought to start thinking about is what of those places. So we always look at it as what's a good investment. Should I invest in this? Let me see. Let me do research and determine if I should invest. Okay, fine. But if we look at it as an investment and a return, feel free to do that, right? There's tons of literature on it. You'll have financial advisors lining up all day that'll tell you precisely what to do with your money. But what if we started to reframe it and we started to say, where do I go use the majority, as many of the rules of money as possible so that I can create more of it to have more to exchange for the things that I want in life? And if we were to look at it that way, we may say, okay, well, there's something to this idea of real estate. Like I look at like crypto. Okay. I've got a buddy who's like big in crypto. He loves it. He loves it. He's a bona fide millionaire as a result of it. Happy for him. But when I try to ask him to explain to me the principles of money as it relates to crypto, like it's all speculative. It's all speculative. Now there is speculation in, just about everything, but he's not giving me anything that for me is tangible of like, here's how I understand money and how it kind of can grow and be created and manufactured and invented and magicked into existence. Like I get that crypto can magic it, but I don't really get any of the other stuff. Now, when I look at real estate, and I go, okay, well, this plays according to so many of the rules of money, especially when you're buying the right type of real estate in the right type of market, given some of the conditions we talk about. Then all of a sudden you're opening up the rule book and being able to use all the rules of money available. Is that making sense? It's just something I've started to think about. If we invent money and if we go, okay, if that's what the rich do, then the question is, what are the rules and how do we play the rules? And where do we go and use as many of the advantages the rules give us as possible? Like if we were going to go play basketball, Steve, and I said, you can't dribble, okay? You can't dribble. How difficult would it be for you and I to play? I get to dribble. You don't get to dribble. Who's probably going to win that game?
Well, I would probably still win, but it'd be a lot harder. It'd be a lot harder if I couldn't dribble. Yeah.
So anywhere you got the ball, you just have to shoot. But I get to dribble all over. Yeah. You probably would win just because you're skilled. But really, like, think about that, man. If it on the football field, if it's like, okay, one team
change the game now.
I'm gonna change the game.
Okay.
If one team can only pass and the other team can run and pass, does that change the game? You're using more of the rules available to you. You have a much better shot at potentially winning the game. So that's the way I'm starting to look at real estate more and more.
It's such a key. Like I really love your analogies because in real estate, like, and in life and regarding money, like if you don't know the rules of the different games that we get to play in terms of money, creating wealth, planning for retirement, those kinds of things, you're at such a disadvantage. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go out and like know every single rule like an NBA ref does.
Yeah, sure.
But you got to know at the very least like the basics. Well, I can dribble the ball. Well, can I use two hands to dribble the ball, or can I only use one hand?
Right.
Do it when I'm dribbling. How many? If I pick up the ball, how many steps can I do? All the different things.
Yeah.
Right. When you know the rules, all of a sudden you have massive advantage.
Yeah.
And as you get to know the rules, that's one of the things that creates confidence. One of the things that helps you overcome fear, like the debilitating fear that can set upon us when like the world is doing its craziness and we're wondering like, what should we go and do, and how do we get where we want to go? When we understand and know some of those rules, like it really is not just life changing from a monetary standpoint, but life changing from a standpoint of not having to walk around in fear with blinders on, living life half blinded. Like that's when fear sets in, is when you can't see where you're going. You don't know how you're going to get where you want to go.
If we were to play with this idea, and I apologize for everybody listening and watching, sometimes we have we just have these conversations and we learn things as because we're in this all the time. I feel like we're just always kind of evolving and learning. And I, until very recently, have not been thinking of real estate and money in these terms. Where can I go and exploit the majority, as many rules as possible of money in order to create wealth? So if I look at it from a real estate standpoint, like we could say, if you want, one of the rules you want to play by is you want to put money somewhere where it produces money for you without you having to necessarily work for it, right? Like that's one of the rules. So Robert Kiyosaki and Rich Dad Poor Dad, he says, every dollar you put in real estate should never come out. Because a dollar is an employee that works 24/7 and can do so for, generations, which is very instructive, right? It's the whole reason why, like, there's times we leverage and use cash flow from real estate. There's a lot of times when we don't pull any cash flow from real estate because our dollars are in the real estate and the dollars that it produces go back into the real estate. So it creates more dollars because we're looking at creating actual real tax-free wealth, not just like, oh, I have $50 more to spend this month or whatever it is. And so if we are going to put money somewhere where it can produce without us having to do a lot of work, that is why we have to go put it into properties and into markets that are likely to produce the dollars. And that is why we select some of the markets we select. So if I were to go if the rule is just I put money into something and more money comes out, okay, fine. That's only one rule. But the other part of the rule is I put money into something, and then in order for that money to come out, that thing that I put it in has to have the ability to produce more money. If I put money into a trash property in Detroit, which, we've talked about in the past, and nobody wants that property and nobody wants to rent that property, and then all that thing's going to do is I'm going to put money in the real estate. It's going to suck money out of my life. It's not going to give me money. But if I put money into a property in Florida and it's somewhere people want to live, it's in a state that's growing, it's in an area that isn't impacted by hurricanes nearly as much as maybe some of the coastal areas are, all of a sudden I'm increasing the likelihood that that dollar is going to produce additional dollars for me. So I'm playing by the rules, but I'm leveraging the rules. It's just like if I was shooting a free throw in basketball, I can stand at the line and I could shoot the free throw. So I can either choose to shoot the free throw with good technique, elbow in, flicking my wrist, or I could baseball throw it at the backboard as hard as I want. Which one's going to produce success? Well, it's certainly not baseball throwing it at the backboard. So I have money in real estate. Now, how do I leverage the rules available to me to make sure that success happens? And that's a big reason why we're in the market that we're in. Does that make sense?
100%, Kev. And as far as like where we're the markets that we're in, like why we're in those markets, and it's not just in those markets, it's very specific in those markets. So let me share with you a few of the rules of investing in Florida.
I love that.
Right? Because over the past few days, I've had friends of mine who have texted me. They're like, "Hey, how are your properties doing down there?" I'm like, "Well, my property is actually great." With Hurricane Helene, for the most part, it was like a non-event for the properties that we and our clients have in Florida. Now, here's the rules of the game, and it requires some analysis, and it requires some forethought, and it requires like some significant knowledge and effort. Okay, so here's one of the rules. Number one, we don't buy or build properties in low-lying elevations. Now, everywhere in Florida is fairly low, but if you're 100 feet above sea level and you're inland by, many miles, as many as 100 miles or more, like your property probably isn't going to experience any or very much flooding. Right?
Yeah.
Because flooding doesn't happen from the rain usually. Sometimes there is some flooding specific to like actual rain, but it's usually like some kind of a storm surge, like low-lying areas. And so we very specifically, even the properties that our builder built for us in Citrus Springs, he purchased those lots after analyzing them and making sure that they weren't in the low-lying areas, that they were at elevations 60 to 90 to 100 plus feet above elevation.
Yeah.
And guess what? 0 of those properties were affected by any kind of storm surge or flooding that was caused by the hurricane. The other thing is being inland, such that, wind is a big factor, right?
Yeah.
And so by the time the storm reached anywhere we have any properties or that our clients have properties, this is still pretty significant, but it had gone from like a category 5 to category 4 to a category 3 to a category 2.
Yeah.
Before it hit any of our properties. So I did get some information here in the last few hours, actually, that there are a few homes that have like shingles that have blown off.
Sure.
Maybe a fence blew over, but nothing catastrophic. And so from a rules standpoint, like you can still be in an area that experiences some of these, catastrophic events, but the likelihood of experiencing something catastrophic has gone way down. Now, here's another thing that's an interesting factor is that, in areas like Florida and other areas where like reoccurring things happen over and over and over again, in an area like in Florida, this is just kind of a thought. It's not necessarily something that we're planning on, but it's something that is factored into where we buy properties. At some point, people who still want to live in Florida, but they are on the coast, at some point they might be, you know what? I want to still live in Florida because I love everything about it, all the way from, the business-friendly environment to the climate to where it's situated in the world and so on. But I'm going to find a place that's just a little bit less likely to have catastrophic events.
Yeah, right.
And guess what? As more and more people do that, guess what happens to the value of your property specific? Right now, the coasts, it's like those are the high-value properties.
Yeah.
Well,
because they have a view or whatever, or there's a nightlife.
They're close to the beach, that kind of a thing. And they'll probably always be like high value. But the areas where we buy, which are way more conservative, are likely to become more coveted because they don't experience those types of things. The insurance is less.
Yeah.
The fear of what's going to happen every single hurricane season is less. All of these different things. And so like those are part of the rules of the game that we've been playing for many, many years, more than a decade in the Florida market. And it's that conservative nature. It's that forethought. It's this process of understanding the rules of weather, understanding the rules of the local areas, understanding like the rules of a purchase-worthy property in an area that is subject to different catastrophes. Like that's what makes the game doable. That's what makes the game something where it's like you don't have to live in fear and you don't have to wonder, like, is this property still going to be around 10 years from now when I'm ready to retire and start creating and taking advantage of the cash flow this property has put in my path.
So we didn't exactly know where this conversation would go, but this is what I hope everybody's kind of taken from this conversation, is that there are rules that are applicable to money, and there are rules inside of what we do with real estate in order to leverage the rules of money to grow it, right? That is really what we're talking about. You could call it criteria, you could call it rules, whatever you want to call it. The idea here is that while the game is afoot, while you have the ability to play by the rules of money to create more of this thing that we are going to refer to as money, you still have to understand the rules even inside of the game, right? So there's rules of the game, and then there's rules inside of the rules, right? There's nuance. Maybe we call it, there's nuance inside of the rules of the game of money. And that nuance is some of those quote unquote rules that we're talking about when we select markets, when we select property. So I hope that if nothing else, it's kind of a brief episode today, but we wanted to get on and wanted to share this idea. We want to let everybody know, first of all, for our clients, if you've got properties in Florida, you've probably already received reports kind of what's going on. If you're considering buying in Florida or some of these markets and you're wondering, why is DFY in the markets that they're in? That is some of the nuance inside of the rules of generating money, and real estate is maybe the best way to leverage the most rules of money creation than just about any other investment. And that's really, I hope, what everybody kind of takes away from the conversation today. Any final words before we wrap up?
No, Kev, I think you wrapped it up real good.
Okay, all right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining the Replace Your Income podcast. We'll see you real soon.
Have a good one.